Urgent! Moscow is under threat. Britain is preparing a ballistic strike. Killer drones and a squadron of death in the sky. The Kremlin is in panic. Germany has played its trump card. This is a failure for Russian air defense. It happened. The world is shocked by German power. This new weapon will cover Moscow. A squadron of death in the skies over Ukraine. American aces have entered the fight. Sensational. The secret airborne special forces are already on the hunt. The Fist of Retribution has been assembled. All this and more coming up. Watch until the end. This is Ukraine Today, Renata Aslanova and the latest events. It happened. The world is shocked by German power. Ukraine's main ally, Quantum Systems, together with aviation giant Airbus Defence and Space, have shaken up the arms market. They have unveiled the latest jet-powered target drone, Red, which will become a real curse for the enemy's air defenses. A project that usually takes years to develop, these giants put together in record time, just a month and a half from blueprint to takeoff. Western media are stunned. It took only 6 weeks to create this monster. The main advantage of Red is its ridiculously low price and the ability to mass-produce them by the thousands. Already at the beginning of summer, these jet birds will be available for order, and their numbers at the front could prove fatal for the occupiers. Red drones will become the brains for the unmanned fighters of the future. They will be used as loyal wingmen for testing the most complex software, turning an ordinary flight into a digital hunt. Experts are puzzled. Why does the giant Airbus need someone else's development when they have their own drones? The answer lies in the unique control and management system and software architecture. The tactical and technical specifications are kept strictly confidential. But one thing is certain. This beast is launched from a catapult and, thanks to its jet engine, rushes toward its target at a speed of 450 kilometers per hour. Enemy air defenses simply won't have time to react. The publication Defense Express has revealed the main secret. The Red drone already has a modification with a powerful warhead, created specifically for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces. This is no longer just a target drone, it's a high-precision kamikaze. But that's not all. And while the world discusses next-generation jet drones, news comes from London that could change the rules of the game. After the story with the jet-powered Red and possible strike modifications for Ukraine, there's yet another technological breakthrough. But this time, it's not about drones. The United Kingdom wants to create ballistic missiles for Ukraine that are capable of reaching Moscow. This was reported by Reuters as well as the British publication The Sun, citing the UK Defence Minister John Healey. The British government has announced a competition for the rapid development of a new ground-based ballistic missile called Nightfall. It has a range of over 500 kilometers, a warhead weighing 200 kilograms, mobile launch capability from vehicles, and the ability to strike targets deep enough to reach even Moscow from Ukrainian territory. According to The Sun, the missiles will be able to launch quickly from mobile platforms. The launcher must accommodate at least 2 missiles and ensure launch within 15 minutes after arriving at the position. After launch, the crew must leave the area in less than 5 minutes. This is already the level of a new generation of operational tactical weapons. British companies are being offered a contract worth £9 million to develop and produce the first 3 missiles for testing. In the future, production of at least 10 missiles per month is planned, with the possibility of scaling up. Back on September 25th, the portal Militarny reported that London was considering transferring such missiles to Ukraine after development was completed. Now it seems the process is moving into a practical phase. The UK Ministry of Defence plans to prepare at least 5 fully operational prototypes for testing within 9 to 12 months. What does this mean? Previously, Ukraine actively converted target drones into strike systems, but now we are talking about a potential strengthening of the ballistic component specifically. This is already a different level of deterrence, a different depth of impact, and a completely different strategic signal. After jet-powered drones comes ballistics. After test platforms come real missiles. Technological escalation is gaining momentum, and Ukraine once again finds itself at the center of major defense decisions. And that's not where the bad news for the Russians ends. It has become known a squadron of death has appeared in the skies over Ukraine. It has become known about the creation of an elite F-16 unit, which includes the best Ukrainian, American, and Dutch aces. This is an airborne special forces unit that turns Russian missiles and drones into heaps of scrap metal before they even reach their targets. A death sentence for Russian missiles and drones. Sensational information: the squadron was formed under total secrecy in recent weeks. This unit has become a steel shield over the Kiev region. Now any attempt by the Russians to strike turns into an instant disaster for them in the air. American pilots with vast experience in Afghanistan have joined the fight. One of the top pilots recently took part in operations in the Middle East, after which he joined the defense of Ukraine. Paired with him are Dutch aces who graduated from Europe's elite air combat schools. They possess tactics considered unattainable for the enemy. According to Intelligence Online, the Western veterans have signed temporary contracts. They work in short rotations lasting 6 months. They have no official ranks or names in the documents. This is Ukraine's secret weapon which cannot be tracked. The hunt for calibers has begun and journalists are stunned. Squadrons go out daily for the harvest, shooting down Russian missiles, particularly calibers, Ka-101s, and Geran-5 drones. F-16s are used for patrols, including at night, to maximize radar coverage and the ability to respond quickly in the sky. However, it should be noted that all this information comes from the statements of a single French publication. The head of the Communications and Command Directorate of the Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Inat, noted that Ukraine is actively cooperating with its partners within the aviation coalition, but it is Ukrainian pilots who are carrying out the combat flights. So is this an official denial, or is it just that the enemy shouldn't know all the details yet? We'll see what happens next. We are monitoring the situation as it develops. Shock, a sensation from Ramstein, a downpour of weapons, a tsunami of money, and systemic reforms in the army. Together, this is no longer just support, but a direct statement about turning the tide of the war in Ukraine's favor. The moment of truth is coming. After this, the balance of power is visibly changing. Watch for the details.
One of the largest military aid packages of the entire war. The latest Ramstein meeting ended with a major victory for Ukraine and a personal triumph for Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov. As a result of the meeting, the partners confirmed the allocation of $38 billion in military aid to Ukraine. The funds will go toward drones, air defense systems, and Patriot missiles.
Importantly, the Ramstein format has been preserved, despite the change in approach in the United States, where the Donald Trump administration has focused on selling weapons. The Ramstein format continues to serve as one of the primary and most essential mechanisms that makes it possible to strategically plan for the procurement of arms in the medium term, looking several months ahead into the future.
For example, Minister Fedorov stated that more than $6 billion have already been allocated in specific aid packages, including over $2.5 billion for Ukrainian drones, more than $500 million for the Pearl program, $2 billion for air defense, as well as funds for artillery ammunition, preparation for naval operations, and other areas.
We see that Russia cannot defeat us on the ground. We see that Russia is waging war against our civilian population. Russia is targeting our civilian infrastructure, our heating plants, and our power stations. I would like to thank you for your support. This is very important to us. We continue to fight against the Russian aggression. And yes, our strategy is working.
It is worth noting separately that Ukraine has reached an agreement with a number of European partners for the urgent supply of Patriot missiles from their stockpiles. For security reasons, the quantity is, of course, not disclosed.
In the future, Ukraine needs reliable security guarantees. I am absolutely confident that the flow of vital American weapons to Ukraine will continue. As I have already said, about 90% of Ukraine's critically important air defense needs are met by Patriot missile systems, and I am absolutely confident that this flow will continue.
At the forefront of those ready to ensure this flow, as is now traditional, are London and Berlin. For example, the United Kingdom is allocating £500 million for air defense and another £150 million for the Pearl initiative. In total, £3 billion have been allocated for military aid to Ukraine in 2026. This time, Germany has focused on drones. At least $1 billion will be allocated for the purchase of drones. They are also investing in air defense and in the training and equipping program for the newly created drone assault units of the Ukrainian armed forces, totaling €11.5 billion.
NATO itself is interested in developing such protocols, in actively engaging with Ukraine, actively assisting Ukraine, implementing the so-called Pearl initiative for purchasing American weapons with European funds, and at the same time actively participating in new joint military-industrial complex structures with Europe.
Norway was also a pleasant surprise. For 2026, $7 billion have been allocated for Ukraine. This includes drones, air defense systems, artillery, as well as the purchase of weapons from the United States.
This country is exceptionally prosperous and economically stable, and it is currently providing Ukraine with a significant amount of active and consistent support. It is precisely its financial contribution that is now remarkably substantial and impactful, allowing for the effective coverage of the critical gaps in resources that the United States is not currently providing.
Belgium, Sweden, Denmark, Spain, Canada, Iceland, Australia, Portugal, Turkey, Slovenia, as well as the Baltic countries also joined the initiative at the recent Ramstein meeting. For the most part, all those mentioned have focused on purchasing American weapons.
This format now, when we see the allocation of such quite enormous sums, allows us to talk about strategy, about forming certain requests for the future. And most importantly, this format shows that Putin's plans to stop aid to Ukraine, both economic and military, in the near future have failed. And the whole overarching Kremlin strategy was fundamentally built upon this, on deliberately dragging out the time as long as possible.
At the same time, it is worth noting that right after Ramstein, the next meeting of leaders on military issues is taking place at the Munich conference. And the fact that the US has come there for the first time with an expanded delegation clearly indicates that the states do not intend to distance themselves from the defense of Europe.
The aviation fist of retribution, hundreds of fighter jets for Ukraine. The agreement for Russian skies has been signed. France delivers a decisive blow. A new batch of legendary Mirages is already on standby, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. What will happen when this armada goes on the hunt? Watch for all the details. Anti-ballistic missiles, guided aerial bombs, a new batch of Mirage 2000 aircraft.
The French side has announced preparations to transfer Mirage 2000 aircraft to Ukraine. There were also discussions about speeding up the delivery of the aircraft and continuing work on record volumes of ASM hammer-guided bombs. At the same time, cooperation continues on the supply and accelerated production of Aster missiles. The provision of long-range weapons, particularly Scalp missiles, was discussed separately.
The new package of French military aid to the Ukrainian armed forces must be acknowledged as impressive, but I would like to talk separately about the Mirages.
The aircraft are decades old, but they are good platforms that accomplish their combat missions, mainly at this point by launching so-called glide bombs, precision-guided, like those same French hammer bombs. It's a good bomb, which in principle is highly accurate and makes it possible to strike Russian military targets dozens of kilometers behind the front line. Plus, this aircraft, the Mirage, has avionics that provide excellent ground detection. That's something our old Soviet aircraft, the MiG-29 and Su-27, can't do. Those still have radars with poor filters against ground interference. But the Mirage has good radars. They can see well against the background of the ground and water.
As for the number of Mirages being discussed, there are no specific figures. But there are some assumptions about how many aircraft Ukraine might receive from France.
That's why I think right now they're completing the first squadron for us in terms of numbers. They're delivering them in pairs, in flights. So the first squadron, somewhere in the near future, will have up to 12 aircraft. We should already have Mirages by then. And then, of course, they'll form a second squadron depending on the supply possibilities.
In addition, earlier Zelensky announced the purchase of 150 Gripen fighters and 100 Rafales. In
2035, the delivery timelines are clearly specified. The point is that, at the moment, the French side is capable of producing up to 3 Rafales per month. At the moment, the question is about increasing Rafale production to 5 units per month.
And here the question arises, will Ukraine actually need these particular aircraft in 10 to 15 years?
In other words, if we're talking about a fur coat, it would be better to buy it in 15 years. This is important to note here. Right now, yes, of course, Gripens are needed. Then Gripens, again, how many Gripens are we talking about? A squadron or two, that is a brigade, again, the same brigade as with the Mirages, let's say 24 aircraft. So we need 24 Gripens in order for them to carry out the maximum number of tasks. For standard tasks, even a single squadron, 12 aircraft would be enough. They would be a bonus there. 2 aircraft are on standby, maybe a backup. So let's say 14 or 15 aircraft. That would be enough. It's the same story with the Rafales. So right now we need at least a squadron, or better yet, a brigade of Rafales as well. So the number of aircraft is about, well, up to 50 at most, but definitely not 250, even in 15 years. In 15 years, since unmanned aviation is developing, we will need 250. Heavy drones like the Kizil Elma and now the Turkish Muse project, they are looking ahead. They aren't buying, say, Gripens or Rafales for themselves. Why would they? If in the future the possibility is that basically 90% of tasks will be carried out by drones, heavy drones that are not limited by the physiological needs of a human, meaning a pilot.
But still, when it comes to purchasing these aircraft, the question arises as to whether Ukraine can financially afford it.
Another key point is the cost of the Rafale. Everything will depend on their price. The price currently being quoted by the French side is about 200 million euros. So once again, these discussions will arise whether they will sell to us at domestic prices, that is, the price for the French armed forces, which is significantly lower, or if it will be, according to international contracts. And international contracts are over 200 million euros, which is a very substantial amount. At the moment, the possible deal amount being mentioned is up to 50 billion euros. That's a significant sum, and accordingly, the question will arise. Whether Ukraine actually has the finances, it's not even about whether France has the aircraft available. At
the same time, if everything works out, then with such a number of fighters, Ukraine could enter the top 10 countries in the world in terms of air force power and become one of the strongest in Europe. Ukraine's sensational new weapon makes the Kremlin tremble. Shattering expectations, this development outclasses all rivals. HIMARS is no longer the standard. The conveyor of retribution has been launched and will not stop. And this is just the warm-up. Watch for the details. Mass production of strike and reconnaissance drones, naval unmanned vehicles, artillery and missiles. All of this has transformed Ukraine from an importer of weapons into a full-fledged producer of modern arms.
Ukraine is launching serial production of its first ballistic missile.
Ukraine is developing a universal missile system based on the HIMARS principle.
Ukraine has launched serial production of Octopus interceptor drones.
A Ukrainian company has developed ground-based robotic systems equipped with electronic warfare modules.
The Ukrainian defense industry has made a leap that just a few years ago seemed impossible.
Ukraine, starting from 2022 in general, has consistently showcased such an extraordinarily sophisticated degree of creativity and inventiveness that surpassed what any of our partner countries had ever anticipated from us, ever before. We have shown just how inventive and creative we can be in achieving dominance at sea, even without our own navy or fleet, but by ensuring full control of the Black Sea through the use of maritime drones.
Today, long-range capability has become a priority, as have drones of various types, bases, and the defense industry. This is exactly what Ukraine is betting on.
110 billion for drones. Ukraine has tripled its production.
It is precisely through drones that Ukraine compensates for the shortage of missiles and achieves parity with Russia in the air.
In fact, for now, drones are the dominant means of striking targets, even in the context of long-range capabilities. That is, long-range drones, long-distance drones, they remain dominant, and to compare them with missiles or any other means of destruction is, for now, not entirely fair or accurate. As soon as we reach mass serial production of missile weaponry, of course, the situation will change.
And this is a key change in the war. Russia no longer has a technological monopoly, even in the air. And again, we shouldn't forget about the sea, which Ukraine can control even without a fleet. And all this is thanks to maritime unmanned systems.
The use of Magora has cost the Russian fleet more than $500 million in losses, according to Ukrainian intelligence estimates. Together with other platforms, in particular Sea Baby, this has systematically complicated the enemy's presence and basing in the Black Sea. December 20th. In 2025, Ukraine and Portugal signed a joint statement on partnership in the production of maritime drones. And
this is yet another important change. Today, partners are not just supplying weapons, but are entering into joint production.
Ukraine and Portugal have agreed on joint production of maritime drones.
The largest defense company in the Czech Republic is launching ammunition production in Ukraine.
Ukraine and Britain will launch production of interceptor drones to combat Shaheeds.
But let's get back to long-range capabilities. Drones are not the only argument in this matter. A separate area is the missile program. We are, of course, talking about the well-known Neptune, which, after modernization, transformed from an anti-ship system that sank the cruiser Moskva into a long-range missile for striking ground targets.
This was one of those presentations we had been waiting for so long. Long-range Neptune. This is, after all, a more high-tech missile which is used with precision like fine jewelry work.
But Ukraine's missile arsenal is much broader. And as the president of Ukraine said, in December 2025, it is being actively used.
I'll be frank, Ukraine is already using cruise missiles today. Neptunes, long-range Neptunes, Polyanitsia Flamingo, as well as Sapsan. To be honest, we've started...
This is Ukraine's long arm. There is little talk about such systems, but their presence changes the enemy's calculations. Less publicity, more results. There are also results in the production of mortar and artillery munitions. But it's not just about ammunition.
Today, Ukraine produces more Tu-S-22 Bodana self-propelled artillery systems per year than the French company Nexter, which manufactures the Caesar. These were among the first wheeled self-propelled artillery systems that we received from our partners in 2022, Caesar. In fact, last year, Ukraine produced more wheeled self-propelled artillery systems than were produced in the entire world in a year. Not just in France, but in the whole world. And
the Ukrainian defense industry is not planning to stop or even slow down. That is why Ukraine, together with its partners, will continue to develop defense projects.
Ukraine and Poland will jointly modernize the MiG-29, which will be provided by the Polish side.
A line of drones, air defense and aviation. Ukraine is deepening its defense cooperation with the Netherlands.
France has announced the deepening of cooperation with Ukraine in the field of drones.
In addition, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, is announcing new developments. For example, a Ukrainian counterpart to reconnaissance drones like the DJI Mavic and the Russian Molnia. And of course, as part of strengthening defense capabilities, the Ministry of Defense continues the digitalization of the front and is implementing a new drone management system. These are not isolated experiments, but systematic work by the defense industry. During the full-scale war, the Ukrainian military-industrial complex has learned the most important thing: to respond quickly to challenges on the battlefield.
with each passing year, Ukraine continues to surprise the entire world with groundbreaking new inventions and technological innovations. And in a very real sense, it is fundamentally changing the established rules of modern war, not only the specific war currently unfolding in Ukraine, but also the broader rules of warfare in general on a truly global scale.
The Ukrainian defense industry is no longer just surviving, it is developing. The defense sector has become systematic, technological, and large-scale. This means one thing: Ukraine enters any negotiations. Not empty-handed, but with weapons it is capable of producing itself.